Hey everybody, and welcome to another Crimson Conversations. We're here with Saskia Gutekunst, and she's an amazing artist.
Hey, thanks for coming on, Saskia.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for doing this. But yeah, we've got, as usual, we've got some of Saskia's work up as a spread. If you guys aren't familiar, I'm assuming most of you are. You can see her work on CG Hub.
Just
No,
the name's on the screen. Just go to saskiagutekunst.com, right?
Yeah. It's just a placeholder actually, but it links to the City Hub account, so it's all good.
Yeah, tons of amazing work. And yeah, if you haven't seen it before, we highly suggest you go check it out.
okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
And
Not a problem.
as usual, we just before we start, we took questions beforehand on the forum, so we're not going to be reading the chat on the stream. Again, if you're not familiar with how we do these, that avoids waterfall effects where people repost the same questions over and over and over again. So if you submitted questions on the forum, we worked them in, and we'll get to those. And if not, just I'll look at the chat from time to time just to make sure there's no audio problems or crashes or anything like that. So if there is a problem, feel free to post it. I'll see it when I can. But yeah, you guys want to get started?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So as usual, we're going to start with the beginning stuff and ask you these basic questions on how you got started. So did you always want to do art, or is it something you discovered later in life? Like maybe were you doing it as a kid, or did you find it as a teenager?
Actually, I always wanted to be an artist. My mother was painting at the time as a hobby. She was also going to art school, and I don't know. I really thought she would do that as regular work. So of course I thought like oh, this is so cool. This is so much fun every day, and I want to do that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got the exposure to art pretty early on, and then I've seen cartoons on TV and Disney movies, and I really love comics. My mom also had a lot of comics, so this was really where my wish was coming from to become an artist as well. So
Cool.
my mother also always supported me with my wish and said like I could do what I want. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was going to be the next question, so that's cool because I know a lot of people that come on here, they have an experience where the family's not necessarily supportive of it. They don't know if you can really make a career doing it. So you had that support early on. That's really cool.
Yeah, the thing is, of course, we were always a very poor family, and my mother always said, you can do what you want, but you gotta have to deal with the consequences. This is like, I really did knew that it wouldn't be easy, to live as an artist. So it's like, of course, I had really big luck with my mom being so supportive of me and not saying like, oh, you're going to do something, something serious, not something art related. My grandparents on the other side were pretty much like, oh, become a secretary or something. Because, art is not the way to go. And you wouldn't earn money with it. But at that time, they were, publishing reports how Disney was kind of making millions with their movies. And I thought like, okay, you know,
Yeah,
someone must be wrong here.
well, that's where the money is. You got to be a secretary.
Yeah.
So, did you go to art school or did you totally self-train? And if you did, where did you go?
We had a high school, an art-related high school where I wanted to go, but it was that they didn't make any tests. That means that anyone really could apply, and I wanted to apply for painting, but I didn't got a place there. So I thought I'd just take what was free, and that was fashion design actually. So I learned to sew, make my own clothes and such. But it was kind of cool.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
like, yeah, actually it is. I mean, never really thought it was. I thought I would, change later, of course, and go to painting. But I really liked the people so much, so I stayed within that field and just finished it.
Oh,
So is
that's really
that
cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Is that something that feeds into like your character design? Do you enjoy costume design on the side?
This that came actually much. Not really, but I just back then thought anything art related will do, and it would be a cool experience. I mean, we also had photography classes, so that was really cool.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, really. And after that, I again wanted to apply to art school, and they didn't take me, which was like for college, I mean, in my city, and it was really a huge blow to my ego. And I was like, there was no reasoning actually why I was rejected. So later on, then I applied to for graphic design in college. And this was actually then what I studied the next 4 years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I just back then there wasn't internet for me, and I didn't knew that you could get jobs via the internet. So I thought like you should have at least something solid, and I thought like graphic design is close enough, so
Right.
just do design.
Yeah, I mean
You would?
that's a common thing. I mean, if anyone remembers, we talked with I think it was Kemp. He did that. I mean, J.S. Rossback has a background in graphic design. It's becoming a more common thing for illustrators to have that kind of common thread.
Yeah, it's like I think of course no one should have this illusions that you are going to do anything with drawings also.
Hmm.
Me, for example, had really a lot of with calligraphy, photography, and video editing. And I mean, it's cool too, but if you want to draw something, you really have to do it on the side.
Right.
Sometimes we have projects where we can choose freely what we want to include. So, of course, I could include drawing if I wanted to, but I can't really expect, to get any guidance from the teachers there. So, it's really something that is kind of within your own responsibility here.
Right.
And you study graphic design. So, I don't know. I think during the last semesters, I already, knew that I didn't really need a diploma or something like that. I basically just did it for myself.
Right.
Because I felt like I paid everything for myself. I paid, moving there from by myself. It's just so much work that went into it, and it was just like one more year, and just go with it.
Okay, so if you're paying for everything for yourself, that leads to the question of when you were in school or when you started working as an artist, did you have to work a regular job on the side somewhere?
During my high school times, I had regular work on the side, like in pizza bakeries, McDonald's, and such. Because I was already living alone at that point, so I kind of, had to get the money from somewhere.
Yeah.
And during my college times, I did partly get state support. There's kind of a program in Germany that you can apply to if your parents are too poor.
Mhm.
Then you can, apply for support from the state. So this was partly what helped me, and I was doing some freelance work on the side.
So for
So
for anyone listening who might have a similar problem, how did you go about the problem of time management when you were in college, where you had to balance, or the art high school, I guess I should say, when you have to balance classes, assignments, a job on the side, hopefully some kind of personal work. How did you go about doing that? Because I know for a lot of people that's extremely stressful.
it wasn't balanced at all, actually. I mean, I was really like a typical student, I was like doing my thing till the deadline comes closer and closer and closer. I was like, oh shit, how the fuck I'm going to do it? And then, don't know, handing in last minute assignments and such. And I don't think I was really taking this seriously at all. I kind of still got through, but I don't think I can really get good tips on that. I mean, looking at it now, I can really just say, do everything in time. Like, do your assignments first or something like that, and then your personal work so you don't have the stress.
Right.
I mean, it was sometimes, like standing awake like 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, because I was just so lazy at times or just wanted to do something else. And, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's always tough when you get through that. You gotta persevere.
I was basically no different than anyone else, actually.
Yeah. So, like, what artists were you looking at when you were starting out? Because I know you mentioned, you're in this art related school. You're taking photo classes. You're taking graphic design classes. You're drawing on the side. Were there any artists you were looking at in particular that really inspired you to push to do illustration?
I actually, in the beginning, wanted to draw comics and making animation. So,
Mhm.
the thing with the illustrations is just, was something on the side or something I did like in the last years, so something kind of recent.
Mm.
So I was looking up to the comics that were available at that time, like Battle Angel Alita. I don't know. Back then it just wasn't so much. There weren't so many comics and mangas around, so I was just reading that what was available,
Right.
like Akira and Ghost in the Shell, but also Sailor Moon. I really loved Sailor Moon. I don't know why. I just loved it, to bits. And Yeah, I really thought I wanted to do comics or draw manga, and I was actually drawing comics so for myself and handling them into to competitions and such. And
Oh, that's cool. Were you
Awesome.
doing that before you tried to do any like painting stuff? Were you just like drawing line
I
art
was
and all that?
mainly working with watercolor.
Wow.
I actually got my first tablet when I was 15, but back then my mother really regulated at which times I could go to the computer. So it was like, a half hour a day, and I just didn't even thinking much about, what to do with some with a tablet. So I was mainly doing more watercolor work with color pencils or something like that. I got my first own computer when I was actually 19, and it was really like some old Power Mac G3, like really, really such an old computer.
Mm.
It's Photoshop 6, and when I got it, of course, was, training my ass off, to, yeah. Because back then I was going to internet cafes, and I've already seen what people could do digitally, and I was thinking, like, oh shit, I'm totally behind these people. And I was trying to catch up as hard as I can, and I was practicing every day with Photoshop and such to, get good at it. And yeah.
Were you a part of all the? I mean, were the? I mean, was like conceptart.org around? Were you looking at that, or I know that like CG Society was around.
CG Society was a bit too high level for me. I don't know. I
Uh,
just, went a bit around that. It was just a bit too creepy for me to do it. So, I don't know, too elite. It was just too, I don't know. I just didn't want to sign up there. I discovered concept.org, I think, in 2004. And I
mm,
think at the end I kind of signed up. I'm not entirely sure anymore.
Yeah.
Ever since then, I would always, looking there when I was in school. I mean, we had internet there for free, so I was looking there, saving some images, put them on my own computer back in my own little apartment, and then, practicing and such. And I was really, like, really blown away by the quality there. That's like that was something that I have never seen before. So I was really, really impressed what the people could do with digital art back then.
mm,
I also think this was the first time where I actually found liking to this kind of realism work, because previously it's been just like I I knew that practicing the realistic style was kind of necessary to practice, but I never really thought like doing illustrations with it. It was just kind of a necessity
Yeah.
for drawing comics, where you simply have to know the basics, and that was about it. But
mm.
on concept.org, I think I've seen like Wes Bird's sketches, and
Yeah.
I thought they were like really, really pretty. So I thought this was actually the first time that I thought that realistic art was kind of so beautiful, and I thought like, oh, I wanted to draw like that. Totally wanted to draw like that. So when the summer holidays came up, I was borrowing anatomy books, and was like practicing away the whole time. All day, for all 3 months, I was just practicing every day from morning to the evening. So
That's awesome. Yeah, it's crazy
yeah,
how.
but I think in the end, I was pretty much wasting my time somehow. I don't know. I mean, summer holidays, I could have driven home, I could have visited friends, and I was, sitting in my own little apartment and was drawing instead.
That's what you
Ah,
gotta
it's
do.
worth it.
That's what you gotta do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy how all across the board, when concept art was real big in the beginning, back in like you said, like 2004, everybody had to up their game. Just having that hub where you could see what everybody else was doing, everybody was like, "Oh, I gotta be better now."
Yeah, or even that, such a job as a concept artist exists. I mean, it was like, I didn't even know that something like that existed.
Yeah,
It was,
and that was the same thing for me too. It was like that. Like I didn't know. Like I knew it existed. Like I knew that somebody did that somewhere, but I didn't know it was like a
somebody
thing.
did that, somewhere, somehow, somehow they hired someone, I don't know, where, but, somewhere, somehow. But it was never so clear, so precise, what you
Mm.
have to do, how this is going to work and such. And yeah, it was really an eye opener.
That's cool. So okay, so you're working as a student. You're doing assignments. You're supporting yourself, and a big switch or a big turning point for everybody who's been in school or has done education of any kind with art is when you get your first freelance job. When somebody first decides that you're good enough to pay for work. So what was your experience with that? What was the first job where somebody paid you to do something creative?
Um, I don't know if I should call. Don't know. Maybe I shouldn't count the coloring job. I did coloring on the side already.
No, I mean that's totally valid. I mean, like, yeah, like what was the first freelance thing where somebody gave you money to work?
That was for LeSean Thomas. I don't know if you know him. He's kind of like working in animation. I was really doing his colored his works.
That's
Uh,
cool.
he's like working now on Black Dynamite. He's a producer. I
Oh,
don't know.
cool.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
he's
awesome.
like he's really a cool artist. So and we still have contacts. So it's kind of cool. But I've never really seen coloring as some kind of what I wanted to do forever. So it
mm,
was really clear for me. It was just for the money. But when you of course have a good line art to color, then it's much more fun. So I
Yeah.
was also doing for Eric Canetti some short story that I colored, and but I think the first job when I was kind of doing character design was for EA Mobile. I was for some I think it was Road Rash Mobile or something like that. Yeah,
Okay,
but
Road
cool.
Rash.
back when there were no smartphones, so it really I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that out loud. So just keeping my mouth shut. But this was basically where I was doing the promo artwork and the character design, and yeah, this was my first job.
Oh, that's pretty
And
cool.
yeah, but it's been a bit problematic because of the time differences, and we did all the conferences via IEM back then,
Yeah.
not
Mm.
Skype. Um, and it was like for me, to stay up really long. So like when I already wanted to sleep, like, and I still had to tell, stay up so we can discuss, my work, and yeah, it was a bit different from the usual.
Oh,
So
yeah, because that's all the way. I mean, I'm assuming you're working for them, and they're all the way in California.
yeah, they were in California, and I was like staying up to, don't know, 11 or midnight all the time, and it was a
Mm.
bit stressful at times, especially when you had already school assignments. But it's really like you really learn to taking certain things into account.
Yeah, well, that's
To
really cool that you actually got it while you were in school, though. I mean,
Yeah, that's rare. That's really interesting.
I don't know to this very day how they got to me, but I was always thinking, I was totally doing really really bad work, and I thought like, oh my God, this can't be, why would someone pay me, to do something like that? But there you go. I think this was really my first, I don't know, serious job.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, so I think that was it, and I think it was like 2019, something around there.
Wow.
Awesome. Yeah, it's young. I mean, that's all that work definitely paid off then.
Yeah, sure. Also, it was kind of cool. They also asked me already right away to do this kind of, little bit manga style, and I thought like, oh, cool, that's just my thing.
Yeah.
Getting that is really, really great, and it was
So
colorful, and yeah,
so when
just my.
you yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm definitely noticing I mean all that stuff even with the guy you worked for who worked on Black Dynamite and those other shows. I'm sure everybody in here is familiar with them. That's a cool thing that very early on that style kind of set roots in your work because it's definitely it's a big part of all the stuff you do. It's a
Yeah, but it wasn't always like this. I was, I think, really intimidated at times, to do it more realistically, and also pressured because there has been a stronger, negative attitude towards this kind of art. So it's sometimes something you just do behind closed doors, because it's negative backlash at that.
Well, I mean that's a
It's
big
like,
thing. I mean we've talked
yeah,
about it on here a lot. Is like there's a big negative reaction to the kind of just the word anime or manga or any of that stuff.
yeah.
People hear it and they're automatically like, oh, that's low or that's not as valid
Or
as
Yeah,
not
I
as
mean,
something.
I noticed
serious.
that right away. So I was really sometimes, having like different places to post my art because I really didn't want to deal with this kind of shit.
Yeah,
I know that right away. So it was sometimes really, really difficult. And at time, then after a few years, I just thought, okay, or fuck it. If you can't deal with it, then this is not my problem. I'm just doing it. So
right. Well, it's
and
crazy because then we see people like yourself. We see people like everybody probably in here knows Hannes. There's other people too, but the people that take that kind of anime influence and really push it to a level where it's something impressive. I mean, you can do really great things with it.
I think if the people would look out for Japanese artists, they have to been doing this since such a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean,
They're
like
really
you're
amazing.
like all the way back to like Akira, like you mentioned earlier. I mean, there's really great things you can do with it if
Yeah, but
you
also,
push it.
the internet people these days, there's such a broad range of different styles and they're really doing great things. So it's really pissing me off at times, this negative attitude. So I think it's really not necessary. So
No, I think it's gone away a bit though. I mean, because now there's such a influx of like mixing styles, and you see a lot of guys joining up on all these places from like Korea and all around who have like that realistic
yeah,
but
true.
also style mixed in, and people are like, wow. And I know there was like Ruangia came around, and
Oh God, I
everybody was
know.
like, wow, that's really really cool. And I think more people are comfortable with adopting that style and bringing it into a realistic, sort of
It's
painterly
definitely
look.
disappearing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like a couple years ago, people were hating on it like crazy. I think it's becoming a little more leveled out. But okay, so did you ever did you go through a weird period after you got out of school? I know this is kind of a common thing for people that go to school, especially since you were working while you were a student. When you got out of school, were you basically working full time, or did you go through a strange period where you kind of weren't getting enough work, or you didn't really know what to do? Was there any kind of transitional, or was it a very easy switch?
I did in fact not know what to do. That's true. Um, I was kind of entering my last semester and then sitting on my diploma thesis, and I was like thinking, oh, what are you going to do? When you're a student, it's just too easy breezy somehow, to just live your life of a student, and then you're kind of confronted with, oh, but you got to think about something when this is over, and then you're in your last year, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do now? I really didn't know. I thought I would moving back, don't know, probably working in a graphic design bureau or something like that in a company. But I got approached by Ambient Entertainment who they were kind of in a production phase for their animated movie, and I think it was the last year, or at least very, very close to finish. And they asked me, to do some color keys and for the backgrounds, something to provide the 3D people to with colors and such. And I was thinking like, oh, cool, just the right time. And it would be just for a year, so I did that. It was in Hanover, like a bit far away, but they thought I could. They said I could, switch, drive back and forth. So I had my workplace at the company, and sometimes I would just work from home.
Oh, that's
So
cool. So you'd work from
yeah,
home and still do like the.
yeah. Of course, it really was just because my workplace was a bit far away. I had to drive like 2 hours with the train, and so that was because I was allowed to work from home, and it's
That's
kind of
nice.
cool, to see the concepts that you did and the color keys, to see them later in the movie in
Yeah.
cinema. It's kind of cool.
Were you
Um,
doing like background paintings and stuff,
um,
or just
I
the color
think it's
keys?
50-50. Sometimes I did just the keys. Sometimes I did a bit of kind of a few environments. I don't even know if they actually took that later.
Hmm.
But also sometimes I got, these great 3D shots, and then I had to color them.
That's cool.
So yeah, it was really mixed. Also, I was not in the art department there in the company, but with the 3D people. So I could directly see what they did with it and how they would use my concepts and like putting them into reality.
Well, that sounds like a cool experience, and it sounds pretty
Yeah, it
different.
was. And people were all really nice. It was really cool.
It's cool. Definitely, you can see all that stuff show through on the work, which is interesting. If people look through your work on CG Hub, I'm sure they'll notice all those different things.
Yeah, I think the movie itself wasn't so great in the end. I heard the children really liked it. I personally really didn't like it at all. I thought it was really boring. Um, yeah, it's just another thing, working on something that you personally would like to see. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
It's like sometimes you get this kind of work and sometimes you don't. And I kind of had to live with a little bit with the disappointment, but it's still really a cool job. So I don't want to complain too much.
Man, it's worth it.
I learned a lot.
So, one thing that everybody notices about your work when they're looking through it, that we want to address now is that you have a very strong and unique ability to balance colors in your illustrations. Um, you mentioned earlier that you did study with some watercolor when you were younger and stuff like that. Where did your ability to balance the palette come from? Because I know that when you work with watercolor, I had to do that in school too. The way you think about setting up the colors in a piece is completely different than, say, using oil or Photoshop. It's a whole different mentality because of how watercolor works. Did it come from that? Was it something you studied later? Did it just kind of come naturally to you? How did you get to that point where you had these very unified palettes?
Um, that wasn't coming from my watercolor times. Actually, because back then I was, just trying to mimic manga artists, and it was back then that they were all working, with watercolors, Copic markers, and such. So I just tried to mimic that because, I thought, real manga artists use watercolors and Copic markers, so I was going to use it as well.
Oh, was that
Um,
more like washes?
huh?
Was that more like washes?
Washes? What is that?
I mean, like if you like basically not like a full painting in the manga, like more like drop shadows and all that.
No, 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 no. It was the full painting.
Okay.
But I was more thinking about, not so much, to make it look real or balanced, just, to make it look pretty and sparkly. And that was my main goal. But anyways, I think with the digital painting, it really took me a while to get used to it. I don't know. I have some old paintings on my blog where you can see that, where my paintings were really like gray. I didn't really use a lot of saturated colors, and it was really imbalanced. It was just gray and gray and gray, and I really just tried to mimic the other artists, who were like this good. And I thought like, oh my God, how the heck could they do that? What is the secret? And I think the trick is actually to make kind of balancing warm colors and cold colors. It's like creating contrast. This is basically what it makes look so interesting. Um, the simple trick actually that I learned over the years is, when there's a lot of light in an image, then you're using more saturated colors, and where there's not so much light, you're just using, more grayish, more cold colors. This usually always works. It's really that easy.
Cool.
You just, it just has to click somehow. It's like we are just able to see color, just through light. So it's kind of logical, right?
Mm.
As when there's a lot of light, you're seeing kind of more saturated, more vibrant colors, and when there's not so much, and it's actually not that hard. You just have to kind of get it. And this came, I think, 2 years ago, something like that.
Oh,
But
that's
also
cool.
inspired by other artists, actually, through analyzing other people's art and trying to find out, what makes their art so special. This is
Mm.
basically how I learned it.
It's cool. Yeah, I'm looking at the piece. Actually, Dave has it up on the screen of the guys kind of creeping through the grass forest thing. That's cool. I'm
Oh, I
noticing.
bet.
Yeah, I'm noticing what you're talking about just in that one alone. How you approach it. That's cool. That's interesting. So, this was actually a question from the forums that I'll work in here because it fits. When you're laying out the colors in a piece when you started out, how do you determine how you're going to do it? I mean, I know you just mentioned, lower light, less saturation, higher light, more saturation. Um, do you have a set of swatches you like to work with? Is there any particular artist that you look at for color? Is it just something you build up organically? How do you approach starting out the color phase?
Um, I don't really look at other artists anymore, but I think back then when I wasn't so accustomed to it, I really tried to take some clues from other artists.
Mm.
What was it back then? Let me think. The bad thing is, of course, I didn't really remember the names back then, but I think a lot of people from the concept art forums, I just saved the images, just like that without really, putting them into specific folders or something like that. Um, but when I start a new image, I at first, more look like, does this kind of suit the image? I mean, I also think it don't really has to be like super realistic. It has to look interesting. So
Mm.
Yeah.
people want to look at it. So making it realistic is like not really a priority. It's just later when I have the thumbnail that I kind of check, what can you change, can you make it more? I mean, the main goal is to make it believable, and it doesn't have to be hyper realistic to make it believable.
Mm.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's a cool point. That's an interesting thing. I think a very common thing. I know I've dealt with it. I know other people in the group have dealt with it. A lot of people sacrifice interest in an image for reality.
yeah,
They'll
yeah,
they'll they'll beat things to death with the realism stick. and
It really doesn't matter.
yeah, it makes things more boring a lot of the time, and it's a hard problem to get over when you're starting out because you think in your head that the realer it is, the better it is. There's this parallel between real and better.
Yeah, that whole moment when you're studying all the time and studying becomes your priority to get better and better and better, but then you forget why you look at it in the first place.
Exactly,
And it's really
exactly.
like I do the most work within the thumbnail, and I kind of also try to think about how the audience would see it.
Mm.
Also, how would they view the image? How would they be guided? Are there certain things that distract from the image, like certain light elements or certain even details? They
Yeah.
may look pretty, but they can distract from the main points. So you really have to check that out.
Is
Not
that
everything needs to be worked out to the fullest. It can be
yeah.
really, really distracting. Also, certain light points, certain special effects, they can really just distract from your main story if you have one.
Yeah,
So
I
I
was gonna
think
Oh,
it
sorry.
should be a first priority, to make
Yeah.
sure what you want with your image and then concentrate on that while you're working on it. So you're not kind of, that your work is not all over the place.
Mm.
Like, you don't want to show off to show your skill. You just want, to make an interesting image. You want to tell a story. You want to draw the viewer in and to make them, look at your world, your image, your character, whatever.
Yeah.
Or just make it focused.
Yeah, I mean, you have a really strong narrative approach to everything you do. I mean, like there seems to be like everything feels like a glimpse into a world, and I kind of assumed that just came from you doing like comics. Like every image you do feels like it's a piece of something, like it's a moment in a story, and I really like that. I mean, because a lot of people just kind of glaze over that where they don't put so much of a focus on that, and like you said, it goes back to just doing the pretty things that are a bit distracting.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you think that comes from doing like the comic work?
This I don't know if this is like a conscious thing. It could be. I'm also looking within comics, on the flow. It's like when you're reading a comic that you keep forgetting that you're watching a comic.
Yeah.
This is also about having the art not distracting, from the main storyline. The layout must be balanced to, have how do I say that? A fluid, reading experience. And
Mm.
it's like with illustrations, it's pretty much the same. And I had that problem when I was kind of working on my skill, my illustrations. I was really, really unhappy with my illustration work. And I was just like, really devastated because I couldn't figure out what it was. And then later I looked at it and it was really like my illustration style was just boring. And I really had to admit that to myself. It just wasn't what I actually wanted to do. So I wanted to tell stories, but I wasn't really able to. It's like I practiced the whole time and I, had kind of gained a certain amount of skill, but I really didn't knew what to do with it. So this was a problem that I worked on, and this was when I started to, get over myself and concentrated more on the things that matter for me. So I think this was a turning point around what was it, 2010 or 2009 or so. I think this was basically the year when I
Yeah,
started to concentrate more on the narrative as opposed to, showing off my skill or showing
Yeah.
off my learn. But
Uh,
like that, basically. And it can be difficult because that might not be what everyone else is doing. Like also, I really understand the desire to to be appreciated for what you're doing or to be acknowledged and to be admired for what you do. For how hard you learned and such. This is really hard to get over. Or simply leaving certain things just the way they are. This can also be very, very hard in the beginning when you're just, starting out to think about such things like narrative and such. So, yeah,
mm.
yeah. I think that's very common. What you just talked about when you're starting out. I think a lot of people, myself included, I know I did, is you get this weird disconnect where you think, if I overwork this, it will be more impressive. It's as
yeah,
impressive as the amount of time I over rendered it.
exactly.
So people end up working on. I mean, like we've had people in the group. I've done this before too, a long time ago. People work on the same piece for like 3 months, 5 months, and after a certain point, you're not improving the piece. You're just freaking yourself out.
Yeah, I also end up, like actually decreasing the details in the end when I work on it again. Like instead of adding something, I try to make it more simple because then I think like you really need to make a break sometimes from your image, and then you're seeing like, oh, I clustered this totally with details that aren't really necessary.
Right.
And then to get rid of them, this is also kind of hard because you're kind of, you have put your heart into it, and then, kind of erasing unnecessary things that it's like,
Right.
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard about people doing that before. So you work it up, and then at the end you look at it and you go, okay, what can I get rid of to make
Yeah,
this work better?
exactly. What is distracting, what is not distracting, or where can I put more emphasis on, or what is too much, or yeah.
That's cool. So a lot of the pieces I've seen from you have a very intelligent approach to laying out the design and composition of the illustration.
What do you
Does
think?
that? Yeah, yeah. I think they do. The ones that Dave put up. There's the one with like the dog people and the girl kind of laying down. There's the one of the people creeping through like the kind of grown-in area like I was talking about earlier. We've got your comic pages. We've got your other illustrations. Did this eye for? I mean, like you're good at leading the viewer through the page, kind of like what Dave mentioned earlier with bringing people into that scene or that world. Did that come from studying comics as well, or was it something you just kind of worked on through graphic design?
I think it's more from comics. I don't know, I never really lost my interest in comics. Sometimes I'm doing more illustration work, and but comics, I just continue to read them. That's just what I love to do. So of course I also analyze them because I think finding drawing comics is incredibly difficult. It's like especially the layouts. They're like really the worst. Actually, I think this is what I really have a lot of problems with, and it's always be kind of like my nemesis. Layouts and such. Guiding the viewer. And yeah, I think this has something to do with it. Because in the end, it's not so different from illustration. If you want to do scenery or more than one character, for example,
Right.
it's really difficult. Or even having characters interact with each other. There's sometimes so many things that you have to watch out for if you don't want to distract the viewer. And yeah, I really think it has something to do with that. So yeah.
So for anyone listening who might be an illustrator that wants to get into doing graphic novels or comics, or vice versa, comic people that might want to get into illustration, as somebody who's had experience doing both, can you talk about the different challenges between doing a page of a narrative comic and an illustration that has to be just as narrative, but it's a single shot?
Mostly again, it's really the layouts. I had to to understand that your art is not the most important thing with a comic. It's like more than just art, and you really have to keep the story in mind and how are you going to do? You have to analyze how are you reading comics. And this is something when you're doing something unconsciously and you have to look at it and have to analyze it and have to consciously look at it. This is really difficult, and this is something I had to learn. I think back then when I was starting out doing longer comics, it was like the author I was working with was always like, yeah, layout, you gotta watch out here, this is really looking nice, but this just won't work, when the people are going to read it, and yeah. It wasn't about the art, it was really about my layout, and this was like, wow, I had to learn so much, and I'm still learning a lot, so this is really another art for itself. Comics, working in comics means you have to put so many more things into account, like, and you really have to work together with your author or keeping the story in mind.
Right.
Again, this isn't to show off. This is about to tell a story, and you can also see that with artists who might not be, as technical as good, but they're still extremely good layout artists, or they're really good at telling stories, and so let's say technical inferior art, although I really hate to say it like that. It might not be technically perfect, but it's still a really great comic.
Mm.
You can, balance so much out with a good layout. It can still stew together, and this is the main thing about drawing comics.
Yeah, I mean, this is reflective of, if anyone remembers the conversation we had with Koro a while back. He talked about the same kinds of things where he was coming into doing comics when he did Transient as an illustrator. So it's kind of the flip. You had a background in comics and it worked into illustration. He had a background in illustration and it fed into comics. But there's always that bump of like it's a similar thing, but it's so different when you have to lead the viewer through the page and you have to make everything work cinematically so they feel like every panel's a natural evolution of the one before it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. It's always cool to see people make that jump between here's my illustration of a scene and here's me directing you through a series of events.
But there are a lot of ways to tell comics, so yeah. Also webcomics recently. There are a lot of interesting webcomics.
Yeah, it's getting big.
So
Yeah, and those ones basically show. I mean, like, there's so many of those that are just, as long as it's good storytelling, really nothing matters. Like, it could be like really bad doodles, but as long as it tells a story, it's entertaining.
It's like also I was back then reading a lot of I don't know if you're aware of that, Japanese comics aimed at women, and they're usually a bit more crudely drawn, but they were just so the layouts were really good, the story was really fluent, and I really just liked to read them. Back then I was all about good drawings here, good drawings there, but when you have bought so many comics that just have good art but no good story or no good layout, you're starting to get really sick of it.
Right.
So like these days I really can't watch movies without good narrative anymore. Back then I really could watch anything for good effects, good graphics, good art, but these days it just doesn't work anymore. I feel really bored.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, I remember reading there's the publisher Dark Horse, and they tend to hire a lot of like really good artists sometimes, and like I remember when I was younger, there was this one guy who did this comic called The Darkness, and it looked like it was fully painted and all this stuff, and that alone was all it took for me to be like, this is great, like, this is so cool. But I mean, like, now I look at it and I'm like, this guy doesn't know how to tell a story or anything. It's just like he renders nice and everything else is whatever.
All the way. I don't know. I still have so many comics here that I don't think I wouldn't ever touch them again. It's like you're getting bored by just reading the first few pages, and it just doesn't work.
I think that's the cool thing about comics in general, though, is that especially when you have illustrators jumping into comics and stuff like that, is like the balance people hit between how much of a narrative is it, like a storyboard versus an illustration. What kind of style am I going to bring in? Is it going to be a painting? Is it going to be cell? Like you get all these cool results. Like you get the extremes, like the Merlin book that I always talk about on here that JS and Alexi did. It's like a graphic novel of illustrations. It's like a comic made of illustrations, basically. Yeah. And then you get the other extreme where it's like you have Transient, and it's like a storyboard for a movie. The whole thing feels like a super polished storyboard, and it's always cool to see what kind of balance people hit between the different things in between.
Yeah, are you actually working on a comic? Because I know you have those few pages up, but I didn't see anything else. Is that like a fully painted comic that you're doing for a client, or was that just some test stuff you did?
It has been a fully painted comic I did for a French publisher, and it got cancelled after 1.5 years.
Oh,
jeez.
It was really a long drawn project. We did like 3 new restarts, and I was really, really down when they said like, that they, want to cancel it, and everything. Thinking now about it now, I just wasn't ready for doing that. It's just like I was really needing really long time to get these pages done, in this fully painted style, and it just wouldn't work. And I can now understand it totally. I think I was really disappointed, but now I can understand it. It's like also really finding a balance, cause you can't take your time forever.
Yeah, well, they still look beautiful.
Yeah,
thank you
so pretty.
So now I'm doing a few test pages and trying to get another few projects done.
Oh, cool.
But I'm taking my time with it and kind of finding out, what works the best. I also really always have the problem to, like, choosing a style to work with. This has been kind of a problem for me, like, which style could I use? It's like, I could really use every style I want to, and I just don't know what style to use. It's really difficult. Especially if you want to, change the style in the midway.
Right.
It's not really good, so.
Yeah, it's always the worst when halfway through you're like, oh, this is cool, and then you have to retroactively
Yeah,
change
yeah,
everything
exactly.
before it. Oh, I found the right idea. 80% of the way through the project.
Yeah.
Oh, let's fix everything. So okay, I've spoken to you a few times on Skype over the past couple weeks leading up to this, and I know that you have to deal with the same kind of problem that all freelancers have to deal with at some point, where it's like, time management becomes a
Oh,
ridiculous thing. Like, I mean, like just in the past week alone, I think we've talked like 3 times, and every time you're like, well, I 24 hours of work. What are you gonna do? So like, how do you approach that? How do you deal with it? How do you balance the stress of like, when it has to be done, it has to be done.
I think it's hard to balance because the workload is always different. I don't have a regular workload. Sometimes I just have so little that I don't really have to do much. So
Hmm.
I'm just hanging around doing my own thing. And then I'm having so much that I hardly get out to do some errands, to buy food or something like that. It's really hard to balance sometimes.
Right.
I think this is really the good thing about the studio job also, that you're having regular times, and when you are not done with work, when you're going home, then your work is done, you don't take it with you.
Mm.
I think this is a really good thing about studio work. So um, I don't think I can offer any solution for how.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
No, it's fine. It's
I
it's.
haven't really solved it myself, so
I mean, that's the thing is that there really isn't a solution because when you have 4 things that have to be done by a certain date, they just have to be done.
Yeah.
yeah, you just have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's another weird thing in freelance where I don't know why this happens, but a lot of times when it rains, it pours. Like, you won't have anything for a while, then you'll get an offer and you'll be like, oh, cool, and you'll take it. Then you'll have 3 more offers the next day, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, why did all of these things line up? Why did I get, like what's happening where all of these came on Tuesday? Like, I don't get it. But yeah, no, that's a common thing. I know a lot of people beginning to jump into it have a big problem when suddenly, that jump into freelance can be really tough
Mm.
because people don't understand that sometimes you're not going to sleep for 3 days, and it's a tough thing. Have you
Yeah, 3 days is really an extreme that I never really want to hit ever again, or
yeah.
not at all.
Yeah, I don't do that.
I really felt like shit, like really the week after. So that's
Yeah, that
so
that was me yesterday. I stayed up. I stayed up just all night last night. I mean, well, the night before last, and I was just like, oh God, I don't like doing this
yeah,
ever.
yeah, it's really horrible.
Yeah.
No, really, really, I think it's really a luxury to get to sleep, before midnight these days. It's like I really would like to have a normal sleeping rhythm again, but I
Yeah.
never.
When it gets to that point where you're not painting anymore, you're just punching a piece of dead meat.
Yeah.
Just slam, slam, slam. You're like, oh God.
And then the client is like, "Oh, change this, please, and change this, and change
Yeah.
this." And yeah,
You send it off, and they're like, it's not what I wanted at all. You're gonna have to do it again. But no. But okay. So I know that you've done some freelance for studios and stuff. Have you ever worked in studio anywhere, or has it all been on a freelance basis?
it has been on a freelance basis, but aside from that job for ambient, where I was actually having my own workplace,
Yeah.
I haven't really done any studio work. Or maybe during my internship in a 3D studio, but I think that doesn't really count as a job. But there basically, I was also doing studio work.
That's cool.
Do you have any desire? I mean, like I know you're just talking about how it's a good way to, end work, but you also get the good, you get the freedom of freelance to go out when you want and, like if you need to do something, you can do it for the most part. Like, would you want to work in studio at some point or?
I have no plans or whatsoever.
Mm,
I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, if there was something lucrative showing up, I could think about it, but I have no plans also regarding this. So I would be fine, just as much with doing freelance work. So
Does it come down to like what the project is? Because I know for a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to work in a studio unless it's something I
yeah,
really want to be a part of.
the studio, I am a bit afraid to just do character work or just do one type of work.
yeah.
Yeah.
I really like about freelancing to have this kind of really, really a lot of different kind of jobs. This is what I really like. And when I see about, I mean, concept work is just an example. I really wouldn't like to really wouldn't want to do character artwork all day. And what I mostly see is actually character artwork or the same kind of environment artwork. I personally really don't really need to have that.
I mean that's a good point to bring up that I don't think people really think about when they're like, oh, I got to get a job in a studio for the security. Is that doing the same thing constantly can really kill the fun.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you have these people. Again, this isn't everybody. This is just a small percentage. But you have people that work in studio that are like, oh, I do the cars. That's all I do forever.
I mean, if they want to do cars,
yeah.
I mean, really, who are we to judge that?
If they just love doing it, then yes.
Yeah, if they love,
yes.
yeah, it's really, if you like doing that, then just do it.
Yeah.
I personally just couldn't imagine that for me.
Yeah, I mean that's my favorite thing about it is just the variety that you get in that it's just like never a set thing, and if you don't want to do something, like you don't absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And again, just as a reminder for anyone thinking of going into doing studio work, if you remember, we've talked with a few people that work in studio before. You have to be able to do everything. You might end up only doing one thing, but you have to be able to do everything.
Yeah, that's not just like, I'm the character guy. It's like, that doesn't last very long. That's the other thing that I always thought was weird about those kind of jobs, is being in like I think the turnaround for most production stuff, at least when you're working in like a game studio, is like they have 3 months of concept art and stuff like that, or maybe a little bit more depending on if it's like an MMO or something, but there's always like this small chunk of time, and then you're just off doing like random things like the rest of the year. So that must be so weird. Yeah.
Boots. Helmets. This kind of thing.
Design all the shields.
Yeah, it needs to happen, but I wouldn't want to do it.
Sorry. So as your style develops and as you're moving forward, I know you mentioned some comics that you really were inspired by earlier. Are there any particular games, movies, concept art studios, shows, books that you're looking at now that are really affecting how you approach your work? Are there any people working in the industry now that you're like, oh, I definitely recognize that I'm emulating certain things from this individual? Like, are there any people you can talk about or projects you can talk about that have really inspired you?
I think I have been influenced by games. I'm playing games since I'm like 5 years old or so. So I've been growing up with like Nintendo and these other oldie consoles. And I think what really left an impact is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. It's like really one of my favorite games ever. Also, the Zelda series in general, it's like with such a simple story, they can still make the game exciting every time. And I think this is also actually a sign of a very good narrative, to make it exciting, despite of having like a really like seemingly unoriginal basis, to work from. So, yeah, I think the Zelda series definitely has influenced me. Let me think. I also really like the art. I would really copy the art a lot from these kind of these little instruction books.
Yeah.
Always these pretty arts.
I did that when I was a kid too. That was like the best thing. You get the game book and
I was always thinking that Link had no pants on. It was really irritating me. Like, no crazy.
Yep. That's like what you do as a kid. You get the game book and you open it up, you copy all the art, and you're like,
or Super Mario. I don't know. I still love Super Mario, and I really love the worlds they created. I think, Yoshi's Island, the one with this little, I don't know, this wax.
Oh yeah, where everything kind of.
This was like really amazing. I'm still amazed by it today. It's like, this is really something I really like. These kind of games.
The game had great art.
Yeah, it really had great art.
Everything looked like the best still drawing.
Yeah, and it really impressed me as a kid. So I think later it was the Resident Evil remake that really influenced me. Like the whole atmosphere and yeah. I think when it comes to artists, it's like I really like Wes Bird stuff, of course. Really like his character work. I was actually I think he did the character design for Gun, and I was then actually buying that game, even though the game was like super short. I was so disappointed actually. yeah, it was just a few hours, and I was like, oh, that's it already, you know. And you're thinking like, whoa, big production time and so on. It's such a short game, you know, disappointment. Um, yeah, I think this and Akihiro Yoshida. I think he did a lot of the Final Fantasy character designs.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. I think I know who you're talking about.
yeah, he has a bit like I think his art reminds me a bit of Arthur Rackham, you know, this fairy tale
Yeah,
Oh
stuff.
yeah, he's
yeah.
amazing.
He's
And I
really,
think I
really
really
good.
like his. He has really a great sense. It's like the right mix between this kind of old fantasy and this kind of newer one. I think he really has it.
Was he the
Really,
guy that did all the cool like production stuff for 12?
yeah, yeah.
Like
It's like
that, it kind of had like the graphite with watercolor kind of
yeah.
effects and stuff. Yeah, yeah, I see a lot of that in your work
So
actually.
I
That's
personally
cool.
don't play that much RPG games, but I really like the art usually. And Akihiro Yoshida is definitely someone who has also with the kind of costume design he really influenced me. I
Mm.
think it's just so cool
Yeah, I
actually.
definitely see that in your stuff, though, especially the design.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
definitely like someone I look up to.
he's
It's
great.
like he's not even rendering this out all the time. It's just these costumes and they just work. They
Yeah,
look good.
they used to make me so jealous, and you just like see it, and you're like, it's so done.
Yeah,
Like, but
it's
it's
balanced. It's like yeah,
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
all of his stuff has such a great sense of design and the costumes and the architecture and everything. It's really cool. So, with that being said, on the influences and stuff like that, and this is a tough question that it's tough for anyone to say this. Is there a piece in your portfolio that you feel is more successful than the others, or is there one that you're like very satisfied with more than the others that you would like to talk about, or not?
or like, is there a certain like I'd want to know like on top of that, is there a certain piece that you feel you executed like the style you had in mind? Like, cause you
um,
you kind of go like you have a few styles.
that's a good question.
It's tough. It's always tough to figure that out about your own work, but
I think it's the one. How do I describe that? With the girl being pierced by an arrow. I think this was kind of personally for me like a breakthrough. Where I thought like, wow, I think this is actually working. Though there are really some parts that are absolutely not being worked out. But I thought like, wow, this is actually a direction that I want to pursue a bit further. So I
Yeah, I
thought,
really love
yeah,
that. It's like almost it's like cartoony, real, and loose, but tight in the areas it needs to be.
that's the one with the dog soldiers, right? Kind of in that
Yeah.
city. Yeah.
yeah, and this is where I thought like, I think this could work actually also in future. I still don't exactly know how I did it, but I think this is something I should look out for a bit more. So yeah, I think that piece definitely is something I would personally call for me successful, as I learned a lot from it and gained a lot from it.
If
And
anyone
obviously the people liked it as well, so I'm still kind of surprised.
if anyone
But it
in the
was
chat is
originally actually
wondering,
also. Huh?
I just said if anyone in the chat is wondering, I linked it. It's on CG Hub. If anyone on demand or on YouTube is watching, it's called "Among the Helpless Audience." It's the piece we're talking about.
Yeah. Also, like the people have really written really nice comments to it and have written what they felt about it, and this is really like the best thing ever. They're not only saying, "Oh, this looks pretty" and "all nice technique," but they're actually saying, what they felt, and so I think this was like um, really something that I was surprised by, and that really made me happy. Actually, it's
Yeah.
also a lot of social interaction when you're doing illustration work, so this is really important for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I like the I don't know, it's sort of a mix of a lot of things, but like there's almost like a Disney feel to it. It's like a west it's I don't know, it's like a really cool mix of everything. It's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
it's
there's
just
all
really
kinds of
nice.
stuff. I mean, I'm even seeing a little bit of James Jean. There's definitely the Disney thing.
But
There's
James
the
Dean is also amazing. Yeah, he's really. I think I forgot him. Yeah, this is really also someone I'm influenced by. I think I really I also have his art books here, and so I really try to get hand on his art books from James Dean, and
oh
so
god, they're so hard to find now.
Yeah, they're all crazy though. I mean, like everything he does with his style is amazing. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that too.
Yeah, it's cool. That strong use of kind of graphic outline with the rendering inside. That's cool.
But it works somehow. It's kind of cool. That's especially when you are having a lot of different style elements in one image, and you have the outline, that you're adding to everything. Then you're kind of adding something that is familiar with every part, so you can mix the styles also.
Right.
It's so other style parts don't look out of place suddenly. Yeah, that's also kind of cool.
So this is kind of it's a precursor to a question we're going to ask later, but are there any projects going on now in the industry that you wish you could have been a part of? Is there any game in development and you're like, oh, that would have been really cool? Or is there any comic coming out where you're like, oh, that would have been great? Or a movie where you're like, I really wish I could have worked on that?
No, not really.
Not really.
I,
That's fine.
I don't know. I think the games these days are just not that exciting. So I think I really would like to work on a game where everything is kind of cool, where it's work out, where the gameplay is right, where the narrative is right. So, it's just not about nice art, and I feel like.
Oh, but you never know about that going into
you
it.
never know. It's like that's really the bad thing. You just don't know. You're like so detached from the project, and usually, and you don't really know how it's going to be in the end. So I
Yeah.
don't really have any expectations, or any projects, that I want to work on.
Do you want to bring Super Nintendo back?
Yeah, exactly. No, not really.
If we get enough people, we can do it.
I mean, it's okay. We gotta move on.
Gotta move on.
There's still the Nintendo DS, so it's doing quite a good job.
It is. It is.
I'm still playing. I think from all the consoles that I ever owned, I'm playing the DS actually the most. It's like 3D games and 2D games, and that's really cool actually.
Yeah, I think they're more willing to take a risk on something like that, where it
Yeah.
doesn't cost as much to develop
But it
for.
still has, these 2D strategy games that I find so cool, like Advance Wars and Final Fantasy Tactics and
Oh
these
yeah,
other games that
definitely.
have all these text adventure games like Phoenix Wright and so on. You're still having them on the DS, and I think this is really cool. I
Yeah,
don't
so
want
many good handheld titles.
Well,
Yeah.
are you mostly focused? So, I mean, in that regard, where you're not really interested so much in working on anything that's like in the industry right now, are you more focused on the personal side, everything like your personal work, your personal projects, or?
I sort of try to. When it comes to jobs, I really don't care about big names or whatever. It's really just, is it fun or is it not fun? I mean, I'm thankfully in the position where I can choose my job, so I'm really lucky here. So
That's cool.
yeah, at times I absolutely sometimes even consider work, as my personal project because I have so much fun with it. So um,
Well, that actually, I mean, that brings us to a good question. Obviously, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. Totally understand.
yeah.
So, we usually ask people, would you ever consider branching out and starting your own project or developing your own IP? But it sounds like you already are. Is there anything you'd like to say about it? Is there anything you'd like to talk about? I mean, even if you can't talk about the project itself, just the process of working on your own thing, making time to work on your own thing when you're a freelancer, anything like that.
I well, obviously there's some comic work I would like to do. It doesn't really necessarily has to be through a publisher. I would also, like offering it like privately, I don't know, printed or for free as a webcomic. This is something I haven't really thought about yet. Other than that, I would really like to do more costume designs, yeah, that's basically, I think.
Is that like
But
designs for real life, like to actually make them?
no.
Because that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, would you ever consider actually doing like costume design for like real like movies or shows or something like that?
Or like a play.
Actually, no. Maybe it would be interesting, but I can't really imagine it. I don't know how this is supposed to going on, but
Because I mean, like you're seeing it now, where like with companies like Weta and other companies, illustrators, especially illustrators who have a background in sewing and stuff like that, are being brought on to design costumes and then make the physical costume, which is like a really cool new kind of thing.
I can imagine that it's cool, but I don't really have much experience with that. So
Ah,
yeah. So what I mostly get from costume designs is, yeah, I worked on that one game where I was supposed to do costume designs, but they kind of put the game on hold before I could finalize anything. It's like it's down.
that's too bad.
Yeah. It was actually really an interesting game. So yeah, damn. But
I
it
wanna,
happens.
I wanna be that guy who's like, sorry, Jeff, you got the gauntlet wrong. You're gonna have to reforge it. Melt it. You didn't get the dragon right. Sorry, no. It's crazy to me that that's happening now on such a large scale.
Well, but it happens. Can't do anything about it.
I'm wondering where that's gonna go. They're gonna run out of books to make movies out of, and then
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
really.
like, what's gonna happen?
there's just gonna be nothing.
Just nothing.
They're gonna remake and remake and remake and remake, and it's just
They're gonna
gonna.
be like, well,
They sometimes want to make remakes for movies that are not really old yet. It's like,
let's redo Lord of the Rings. All right. It's old. It's been 10 years. Let's do it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just gonna keep on happening. That's why I predict it's just gonna be inbreeding for the rest of movies.
Yeah, like I think, with The Life of Others, and then suddenly it was announced they want to do a remake already, like 2 years afterwards, and it was like, whoa, why?
Yeah, I mean, too much money, too little ideas. Who knows?
I mean, they've got what, 6 more Narnia books that they can try to make interesting. There's a few things left.
A couple, handful.
Just a couple. But okay, so kind of like the question we asked a few minutes ago, but a little more expansive. If you could have worked on any project ever in the history of media, any comic, any game, any movie, anything ever, even from before you were born, whatever, what would it be?
Hmm. Well, hmm. I don't know. Really, don't know.
Are there a
I
few?
never really thought about it, so this is kind of hitting me now off guard somehow.
But
Um,
then you could collaborate with any artist who are also working on it.
I,
Exactly. So it's something
I
else to
think
consider.
I think I would really, don't know, like a fantasy game or doing like the character and costume designs. I think this would be really fun.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, you could have worked on Final Fantasy Tactics.
You could have.
well, that would be. I think that would be like too great, but like no.
I always think about that.
Like for an RPG game or something like costume design and stuff. So I think that would be really really cool.
Where it's like when I'm a kid, it's that phenomenon we've talked about before. Where I'm a kid and I'm looking at, Yoshitaka Amano designs for games, and I'm like, this is the coolest stuff I've ever seen. And I'm
Mm.
like 10 years old, and now I look at it and I'm like, there were no standards back then. I mean, like it's still cool, but it's like it's come so insanely far
Yeah.
as an industry now that like when I look back at it, there was so much more freedom back then because these rules didn't exist.
It's
No,
also
yeah.
like they really try to kind of push the hardware that they had, like with these limitations and doing the best out of it. It's like you can really see that sometimes still in these old games.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah, they really tried to do something with it, and it looked so pretty. You can really see that how much effort they went into it. And today's like, oh, they're all looking kind of sameish later, or they have like really pretty concept art, and the game it looks so sameish, like it's
Yeah.
the same all the time. And so,
I mean, it's still my favorite stuff. It's weird because like the less pressure there was for some reason, it yielded better results. Like when I look back at like probably I think in my top three influences of all time, Terada Katsuya.
yeah,
Well,
he's great.
my God, when I look at the old work he did, like like he'd do one-off illustrations for games for like Nintendo Power, where
The Zelda comics, right? These were so great.
yeah, like he'd just do this cover that was just Dragon Warrior, and it's what he thought it was, where it's like this serious guy in front of like a stormy background with a castle, and it's like the realest thing I'd ever seen back then. And it has nothing to do with the game. It's just they gave him a title, and he did an illustration based on the title. Like
Yeah.
that stuff, it looks so much cooler.
Yeah, he's like that's people like him can just sell games. Like you just see it and you're like, I want that. It's probably nothing like that, but I want
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's like, the work he did for Zelda, like when you look at the old stuff, it's like why haven't they made a game that looks like his illustrations of Zelda yet? Where it's like, Link with the giant pig Ganon and stuff, and it's all really cool looking. Like none of the games ever looked like that, but he had such an ability to just be like, here's a concept that will get everybody excited.
Yeah, I think about that now too, where you look at you look at people who end up doing stuff like even like editorial things. I mean, like if you worked for a like a game magazine when it was super popular, it's like they wouldn't just, if a game came out, you couldn't just wing it on what the guy looked like. It's like
Yeah,
they wouldn't let you just be like, hey, make this as cool as possible. It doesn't matter. Because, I mean, like back then you had, the small sprites, so you could just improvise.
just do whatever you wanted.
That whole era is really cool for that.
Yeah, true. Also, like, it was just, pixels and still was really atmospheric back then. I remember
Mm.
playing the old games and I was, like, sometimes really shit scared, like, when something happens. I mean, these days you're just smiling about that, when you're having games like Dead Space and such. But, back then it really challenged your imagination.
Yeah,
Like,
the influence that you'd bring to it.
mm, exactly. Also, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time back then, whoa,
I know.
I was like 10 years old and I was, whoa, like, I just couldn't handle it. It was so awesome, so amazing.
When all that art came out for that, I remember
Yeah,
before the
exactly.
game came out, you'd see it in magazines and you'd be like, "This is the greatest thing that ever was or ever will be." And you're
Yeah,
like, "What is happening?"
yeah. Of course, this game hasn't really aged that well, but the gameplay in itself is still fun. Actually, a bit simplistic maybe today, but still really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the best games I ever played.
Oh yeah,
Basically.
definitely. Yeah, I missed that. I missed that whole. It's kind of gone now. That whole thing where people could just kind of wing the art for a game, and as long as it was interesting, everybody would get excited about it. Like again, back to Amano, that illustration he did for Final Fantasy VI of the girl in the machine with the city in the background and everything is like that was so much. Nothing in the game looked like that, but it sold the idea of like this is what this is going to feel like, and it's going to be this exciting and like I want it to come back so bad.
Maybe.
I'm so sick of everybody like because now it's at a point where people will turn down work because they'll be like, well, the Emperor's glove has 6 buttons. You only gave it 4, so we have to reject this. And it's like, oh, come on. Just beating it to death now. But, okay, so moving forward, are there any
Okay.
particular things you'd like to try to tackle in your work that you feel like you either haven't gotten to yet or that you haven't been ready to yet? Or is there anything you'd like to adopt as you go forward stylistically?
I think. Well, I'm having a lot of background art at the moment. This is something that wasn't so persistent back then. Um, it's like there is a right time for everything. Back then, it just wasn't really my thing.
Mhm.
Now it's like I really want to try that. I really try to do it good. So maybe science fiction. Maybe science fiction never really has been my cup of tea. But sometimes I think there are really some things that I think that look really cool. I want to try that too. But I think when the time has come, this is probably something I really want to try. So
It's cool.
yeah, but not now. Maybe later.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like the older I get, the less I pressure myself to such things. Like I don't really have to try anything. I'm doing it when I want to try it. So
Mm.
What kind of science fiction are you thinking?
I really like actually also back then. I think Metal Gear Solid is really amazing.
Oh
Actually,
yeah.
also the designs. I mean, the game itself was really cool already. Or Alien. I really like the Alien movies.
Mm.
Yep.
Movies,
I
cool.
think every conversation we've ever had goes back to Ridley Scott at some point.
The first two movies, at least. I haven't seen the other ones, but the first two.
You haven't seen Alien 3?
Don't
No.
watch it.
It's the best one. What are you doing? It's 3 times as good as the first one.
Is it? Like
No.
Terminator 3, right?
It's the worst. It's the worst thing.
Yeah.
Oh god.
So you're not talking like high fantasy science fiction like super futuristic designs. You're talking more of like that grounded in realism look.
Not, I don't know. It don't has to be, It really depends on the narrative, if it suits the story. So, I really like the grounded science fiction, actually, that, has not 1,000 blinking elements. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there are a lot of things where I think, like, why is this stuff even there?
Yeah.
I mean, or when they are on space stations, everything is so gray and so dark, and I think, like, if people live there, don't they want to have it comfortable? I don't
Right.
understand that. It makes just no sense.
Yeah, everything feels really cold.
Yeah, I don't get this at all. It doesn't make sense, really.
A lot of that stuff starts to come off as quick fixes the more you see it.
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, he wasn't happy with how science fiction the design was, so he covered it in LEDs. And you're like, whoops. Oh, he put vents all over it.
Or like
Oh,
Lens flares.
this same looking monsters, like this kind of, wrangled and don't know. They look like clay or something like that. They
yeah,
look
exactly.
these kind of, oh, I tried this and I tried that, and I don't even look out why it is like that, or does it even make sense?
Yeah, because people don't think about how that thing would evolve to be what it is. They're just like,
Yeah.
oh
So
yeah, no, let's do this.
also with the violence, I sometimes think it's just too much.
Yeah.
That's like when I played Dead Space, and I was really surprised because I think there were some parts that really were, really creepy. I think they were really cool. But then there are these monsters, and at certain points, I think that it just has been too much. There are so many worn out horror elements that were just too much. They weren't necessary.
Yeah, it gets
That's
stale.
yeah, exactly. It's just like with Resident Evil or even Silent Hill. I really like the old Silent Hill games. I think they're really cool. Like this
Yeah,
kind
there's
of
like not a lot going on.
yeah. Or even surprisingly so, the Silent Hill Shattered Memories for the newer game. That was surprisingly good. Where you don't have to fight at all.
Hmm.
I was really skeptical if that would work, but it was still really, really eerie and creepy, and this worked really great, and it would be cool to see more games like that, you know, instead of taking, fighting and violence for granted, but actually think, does it make sense or does it not make sense, and
Yeah, like a
so
lot of that stuff is weird now. I don't know if you saw all the stuff for Resident Evil 6.
yeah, it was a bit too much for my taste actually. I think this four was actually kind of cool, but
Yeah, 4 was
they were
good.
already, getting into a direction where I think like, it's just too much, and it's like, whoa, this again, and
Yeah, they're doing that whole
they're just like
cinematic thing.
Wesker to pop up somewhere again, and I think like, isn't this finally finished? Why do they have to bring up the same characters again and again and again and again and again?
Yeah, that's the whole thing I always come back to is like if they're gonna do that, like why don't they just make something new? Like
Yeah,
why make it that? I mean, I get that it needs to be the name for the money, but I just wish it wasn't. I just wish
So
they'd go
wait a
back.
minute. You're telling me you're not excited that a certain
no,
white-haired son of Dracula might be in the new Castlevania?
no, not so much. Well, I think Wesker is kind of cool, but
You're telling me you're not going to buy Brotherhood of Shadow Men for Alucard's
Castlevania.
return? I don't know.
also not Call of Duty 15 and Years of War 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, you know.
Yeah, it's too bad.
I just want to say on record, if Konami's listening, any game you put Alucard in, I'm going to buy. So keep doing it. Keep doing
I
it.
didn't got through the first part actually, so with Gears of War, I just lost my interest. So that's that.
What we got to do is we got to get an elite team together, and we got to bring back Shadowrun. That's all we got to do. We just got to bring back Shadowrun. We got to make it work.
I always want that job. I want somebody to give me the job to be like, "How do you make this new?" And I'd just be like, "Thank you," because I want that job so bad. Because it's like everybody's like, "Well, you make everything part of a movie, and you just tap buttons to finish it."
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. I think Left 4 Dead was really cool actually. This is really a game that I played a lot.
That
Like,
was a cool idea, though.
yeah.
When that first came out, that whole concept of how they made it was really cool.
I mean, when you have the right people, it's like you're playing it endlessly. I also think with more recent games, I think Mirror's Edge was really cool. A bit frustrating at certain parts, but like also the main character was really like not this kind of over sexualized female characters, but actually a rather normal character. So
Yeah, but Valve does a
yeah,
good job in general.
yeah, refreshing at least. It was really refreshing. They're not copying all this parkour stuff, like with Spider-Man. You see that in the trailer, and I thought like this looks just like Mirror's Edge. So with the whole perspective thing.
You got to put parkour in games now.
Yeah, no, it needs
Everywhere.
definitely yes.
Got to do it. That's what it's all about. So, is there anything games-wise? We kind of talked about it earlier. I think you said not really, but is there anything coming out that you think might be interesting? You're like,
Mm.
oh, that looks kind of cool.
Hmm?
Is there anything at least coming out where you're like, that might be cool?
Uh, Good question. I didn't really look into the new games recently. Hmm. No.
I still want.
So
I still
jaded.
want. I want Dragon's Crown to come out so bad.
Um, I don't know. No, not really. I don't know. I'm kind of, curious about new Zelda, but again, I don't really. Um, it's like, I can expect that it's going to be good, so I'm not really
Right.
looking out for it anymore. I'm just waiting that it's getting done and then I'm playing it, and that's about it. Um, I don't know if they maybe continue a new Phoenix Wright game or Ace Attorney. Like, I really like this kind of point and click adventures.
Right.
With a new part with that, and I think it would be really cool.
That's cool.
But there hasn't been really an announcement yet, so no, I don't really know.
Yeah.
There's no game at the moment.
There's
Yeah,
nothing
I mean,
coming
there's
out.
not
No.
really a lot.
No.
Really.
I think there's like two I can think of that I'm kind of excited for. But yeah, it's weird going forward how things become more stale.
I don't know. I sometimes think maybe it's because I've really gotten older and interests change, and maybe it's just part of the game that you're not so interested anymore. But
Nah.
back in life, I've been much, 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 much more excited for games to come out. So
Oh,
maybe
God.
it's just me.
There you go. Well, I don't have any more questions, so we're just talking now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I was like
we're
wondering what was happening. I was like, did you run out of questions?
we're out of questions. I mean, I've run through all of them, so we're just talking now.
Well, I can wrap it up and then, you know, just go to Skype.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Saskia?
Yeah,
Before we
anything you
start?
want to like.
I don't know if anyone else doesn't want to know anything more. No, no. It's-
I'm sure they won't complain if you have anything you'd like to talk about. I'm sure the
No.
chat won't be like,
Yeah,
no,
things to talk about. No, I'm totally
I
like,
don't want to hear that.
what would you want to hear?
Well, everybody says that they love you.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. That's so
love you.
nice from you. You're so kind. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for coming on and talking with us. You know,
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
we
This
really
is
appreciate
the
it.
this is the end part where I give you negative pressure, where I'm like, if you ever wanted to put out an art book, we'd all support it.
We
Put
want it.
out.
We
Give
need it.
us, give me what I want. Make an
Yeah.
art-
No, I would, but it's always funny whenever you talk to anybody working and you're like, you should do an art book. They're just like, I'm not ready. Like nobody's ever ready to do it.
Oh, no. The answer is you're never ready. You never will be, and no one is ever going to be ready. You know.
If you
No,
wanted to sell some prints, I'd buy them.
But, yeah.
I would
It's
too.
like no one really has the self-confidence, and so to say honestly, okay, I want to do this, and there's like another thing with art, um, like having self-confidence with your own work, and self-confidence to like go through the end, with your goals, and also don't be afraid of changing your mind at times, because I think this is kind of a problem sometimes when you're getting to start out with having art and such.
Mm.
Or it's like with the problem with not getting the reactions that you want from other people, and this is really why self-confidence is kind of important, because I sometimes think there is this expectations to get nice comments when you're uploading something, like, oh, I did it, I put so much hard work into it, and why does no one comment on my artwork and such. But you just can't really expect other people to fulfill your wishes.
That's a good point.
Mm.
It's like so common actually, back then when people are younger, it's kind of more apparent, oh, why doesn't get my work the attention that I wanted to have and such, and that's really normal, and I can really understand it, but this isn't really like, you always feel then when you're not getting the reactions that that your work is kind of bad, but this isn't true. That just means that your work might not appeal to people like that,
Mhm.
Still doesn't really say something about your quality. It just says it doesn't appeal. So, yeah, you really should have confidence about what you're doing, and kind of, not being so down when it doesn't really get the reactions that you want to have. So don't give up.
Yeah,
That's-
be
that's it.
strong.
Yeah, be
everybody.
strong. I had that a lot when I was younger, so I think we all go through this.
Yeah, I
But
think pretty universally. I think
getting
especially in the
discouraged.
beginning, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a steep incline. Takes a lot of work.
That's true.
But hey, thanks for coming on and talking. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's been great.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
And if you ever want to sell prints or put out a book, we'll help you make $1 million. So
We'll do our best.
You're my minions now. I
yeah,
get it.
we'll do whatever. See, that's the thing. By
Yeah.
coming on and talking, we now owe you. So anything you want, just let us know.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks
again.
everybody for watching. We are going to upload this onto YouTube as well as the uh, Bjorn Hurry interview that was last week. I've been crazy busy, so that's why it wasn't up yet.
Yes.
So, yeah, thanks everybody. And do we have anything to announce, Dan, for the next one?
Yeah. We're not sure when the next one's going to be. It's going to be soon, but stay tuned for that. We're going to be bringing on art director at Riot Games. Do you want to mention that real quick, Dave? We don't know what date it's going to be yet.
Yep, we're gonna bring on Edmund Gonzalez. He's a awesome dude.
Yeah.
He's an AD at Riot, and he's really really cool. So he's gonna come on and talk about everything involved with that job, and it'll be a little different than the usual stuff that we do. So it should be really cool.
It's going to be a cool switch to bring on an AD and talk about, the upper level stuff, looking down, how do you work with a team of artists and art direct. So that'll be a nice switch. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, so come check that out. And again, thanks for coming on, Saskia. You should go to her website, saskiagutekunst.com, and be amazed by how awesome it is.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. We all love you. Goodbye.